So what does it take to find that role?
Being aware.
Experience. Being aware, experience. And all of it has to be filtered through a very specific lens, which is authenticity. You have to be willing to find the truth, whatever it is, to follow the evidence, as they say, no matter where it leads. Because with regards, for example, the archetypes, everybody wants to be the hero. Everybody wants to be the hero archetype. But very few people are the hero, but we want to be. And so if you act like the hero, you're never really going to be the hero. You're going to do some things that approximate the hero. Just like if any of you guys have, let's say, for example, like a cat that was raised around a bunch of dogs, you'll notice that the cat will start to behave like a dog in certain ways. Yeah, the cat's not a dog, but it'll think of it, it'll act like it is because it won't know anything, it won't know any other way. But then that stops it from being what it really is, a cat. And it builds its own, it builds this kind of wall in the cat's mind. A lot of us are the same way. You might be the, I mean, imagine if you want to be the ruler archetype. I have a good friend of mine who's the ruler archetype. We talk about it all the time. And he was just absolutely miserable in his life. A lot of bad decisions, he was going horribly. And I introduced him to these concepts, and he's now, he's kind of discovered what he is, and he's living his life in such a way that he's fulfilling his archetype, because now he understands what those unconscious desires that he never really knows that he had. And the guy's life is just completely, 180 in just a few months. He has clarity. Now we'll see if he sticks with it, of course, because that's the other part of the equation, being able to stick with the change. But and again, this has nothing to do with me. It's not because I'm brilliant. It's because Carl Jung is. I'm able to say, hey, here's what this one guy has said about some things. And through that, he's discovered who he really is. And again, his life is just complete 180. He's squared himself away. He's sorted himself out. And there's still stumbles, of course, and there's still a lot of learning on that in that direction. But imagine if he's the ruler archetype, and yet, let's say he looks at them and he thinks, well, I want to be I think I'm the rebel, and he tries to be the rebel. That's the complete opposite of the ruler archetype. And of course, there is some difficulty there where maybe you are elements of both of those two things, which means you're an incredibly complete personality. But that's fine. You have to be able to be authentic and real in how you interpret things, how you see the world, as best as possible. Certainly as best you can possibly do it with regards to yourself. But the real enemy there is this thing here, nihilism. Does anybody remember what nihilism is? Oh no, you wouldn't know. We didn't do that this year. Does anybody happen to know what nihilism is? Yeah.
Like the complete devoid of meaning.
Yeah. Nihilism is the idea that nothing matters. Another way that Nietzsche describes it as the leveling tendency, to make everything as equally meaningless. And a true nihilist, it really comes down to this thing of, should I live or should I die? Doesn't matter. Should I eat this steak or should I eat this cheesecake? Doesn't matter. Should I go to college or not? Should I have a family or not? Should I, read good things to put in my mind, or should I read negative, destructive things? It doesn't matter. Nihilism is this idea that nothing matters, and it's a dangerous thing, because once you start to believe that nothing matters, well, genuinely now nothing does matter, and you're going to find that your attitudes are going to follow deeply in that, because you'll be led to this idea that since nothing matters, doesn't matter what I do, therefore my life doesn't matter, and if my life doesn't matter, well, there's this really ugly scream that happens inside of us, because none of us wants to go through a life that doesn't matter, especially with regards to any kind of suffering, which I'll talk about in just a short bit, because it's been a good 12 hours since I talked to you about suffering. But there's this thing where the suffering has to matter in some meaningful way. The struggles I go through in life have to matter in some meaningful way, and if nothing matters, well then, my God, why bother going through suffering? In fact, the only thing that seems rational to even do is to just commit suicide and end the whole thing so we can avoid all that suffering, because it's meaningless. But then again, should I kill myself? Nothing matters. Doesn't matter if I do or don't. And and many of you, I'm sure, know people like this. I don't know that they've sat there and scratched their chin while sitting on the edge of a bed and said, nothing matters. I'm a nihilist. But they certainly live like this. You don't have to be labeled as a thing to be that thing. And these are not going to be the happy people that you know. I mean, there is another way of looking at it, which is that everything matters. And if everything matters, well, that's the thing. Everything matters. Do I dare to eat a peach? You know, do I dare? Do I dare? Everything matters. It means that every interaction that you have with a stranger matters. Whether or not you eat the steak or the cheesecake matters. Whether or not you read the book that puts positive or negative things in you matters. Hell, even if you decide to cross the street and it says don't walk, even that matters. Now everything matters. Everything becomes a matter of responsibility. And the downside to that is, well, shoot, everything matters. You don't get to skate through life with, pretending like you're not some kind of a really important connective node with everybody else on the planet. And who wants to think that? Because now, whether or not you waste time or whether or not you effectively use time, whether or not you use your education or whether you waste it, whether or not you eat the steak or the cheesecake, all of that now matters. And it's hard for us to get our heads around how that can be the case. And of course, the upside to this is that now there's no responsibility. Now you don't have to form meaningful connections with people. Now you get to avoid a lot of the things of life that for some people would lead to some level of suffering. But again, of course, now if everything matters, there's the upside to that is you gain responsibility, but now what you lose is that sense that you can just kind of do whatever you want to do. Everything becomes now a matter of responsibility. And that's a heavy burden for a lot of people. It's a heavy burden for a lot of people. And so some people will try to take this mid path where they'll say, well, some things matter and other things don't. Okay, but now how do you determine which is which? That becomes the key. And how you determine might have more to do with your personality than anything that has to do with the objective world. Meaning, well, whether I cross the street or not doesn't matter. Well, that just says something about you as your personality type. It doesn't say whether or not crossing the street on the blinking light matters. In other words, how did you determine that didn't matter? Now, you might be able to think about it and say, well, the things that impact the world around me and make the world a better and worse place, those are the things that matter. If I cross the street in the blinking red light, then that doesn't really impact anybody. It doesn't make the world better or worse. It's just neutral. Fine. But now you're getting to something there. Now you're getting to an understanding of how to figure out in life what matters and what doesn't matter. But you're going to notice that some of you, I imagine right now, are already kind of spinning in your head and just kind of like, why? What the hell? If you're even paying attention at all. And why? Because it's a lot to think about. But that's the problem, is that most good and evil in the world are done by people who don't make up their minds to do good or evil. They just wake up and operate in the world around them, and sometimes it happens to turn out for the best, just like sometimes we happen to get to the right answer with true belief. But a lot of times we get it wrong. The things that we do end up making the world a worse place. And sometimes we get to know it, and when we do, we oftentimes will come up with excuses for it. Well, that's because ... That's whenever I hear that phrase, that's because, I know that whatever's going to come after that is probably going to be incredibly self-serving and not true. But I'll listen to it anyway. Sometimes I may end up surprised. But by and large, whatever comes after that, I know it's going to be something self-serving and is not going to have a lot to do with reality. And if it does, it's only by happen chance. So now I start thinking about when you do that, though, when you start to figure out what in life matters, well, now you're saying something that's about you. You're saying something that's about you. So, for example, if I were to ask you guys, what does matter in life? What are some things that you might say matter in life?
Better education.
And education. Why?
So you're not ignorant.
What's wrong with being ignorant? Some of my worst students are the happiest people. We'll go back to taking advantage of. Okay. So maybe, yeah, so in other words, this education thing will be useful in terms of how, it'll be useful in terms of how it promotes a better life. There are ways in which education can promote a better life, and there are ways that people will look at education and say, man, I wish I didn't know what I know. But you'll find, how often do you hear older people say, I wish I knew then what I know now? Very rarely do you hear old people say, man, I wish I didn't know that back then. It does happen, by the way. It does happen. There's a difference between education and, maybe we say knowing facts about the world. A friend of mine's mother passed away several years ago, and when she was close to dying, and he was only 14 at the time, by the way. She pulled him up at 14 and said, "Let me tell you who your dad really is," and explained to him how abusive, how physically and mentally abusive his dad was when they were younger. So then at 14 years old, he goes to his dad and tells his dad, "Your mom said this is how you were," and he said, "Well, let me tell you how your mom was." And then goes on to explain to him how I don't say, combative and promiscuous his mother had been when he was younger. Is that anything that a 14-year-old should have to hear about their parents?
No.
You know, is it true? Maybe, but there's certain things about truth that have a way of screwing us up and don't preserve anything positive about us. They don't help us to project forward into the world in any kind of a positive way. In fact, it makes it harder to do that. And that's the kind of thing that's probably the case. I wonder how many of you really know everything about your parents. And I wonder I imagine many of your parents will say things like, "My kid knows everything about me." Okay. Let's go back in time. I bet we can find lots of things. And that's probably a good thing. It's just like as you guys are living right now. As you guys are living, I have a student in one of my classes who shows up this morning. He shows up just completely baked at 7:30 in the morning. But that's the thing, that you sit there and you wonder, like, God, what is it that this kid is running away from? That he has to be that fucked up at 15 years old, at 7:30 in the morning. Is it something, does he sit there and go, "My life is going great, now let's just make it greater"? No. And this isn't obviously he's been doing this for a while, and he's going to go, "Wow, what are the chances that this person is going to be a positive, contributing member to the world around them by having children someday? Can you imagine what this person's children are going to be like?" Because he's going to have a choice. He can live as a hypocrite and tell his kids, "Don't do this stuff," or he can do something which is almost worse, tell his kids the truth about who he was, and then that gives his kids complete free reign, probably. "Well, you did it when you were my age. You did this, you did that, you did this, you did that." It's one of the reasons I really strongly encourage you guys to hold on to your journals. Whether you wrote every day, 2 pages, and got stamps and everything, or whether you wrote 3 sentences, 3 of which would be these right here. Because then that's going to be a good reminder to you as you go further in life. If you sit there and you're like, "Man, how come I don't have any opportunities in life? How come the world seems to be against me?" And then you open up the journal and you realize, "Oh, I wrote 2 sentences this day." And maybe at that point you'll look at it and you'll go, "Huh." Maybe you'll have some thought about the comment. And then a good question to ask yourself is, why didn't I write more than 2 sentences that day? What was going on in my life that day? And I wonder if it'll be so important 10 years from now. It isn't that this stuff is going to be super important to you in 10 years. But what it is it's going to give you a window into who you were 10 years ago, which is going to give you a direct line to who you are today. It shouldn't surprise anybody when you look at this stuff. It's like, "Oh, that's right. I was in that class with Skellen." And then you'll think back, "That's right. I used to keep one earbud in and play music while he talked, and then pretend like I was paying attention to a word he said. Oh man, you didn't know. Right. Yeah. I didn't know you guys were high when you walked in here either. But I'm not your parent. I'm your teacher. I give you opportunities to do things. I'm not your babysitter. I'm certainly not a police officer. My job in this class is not to run around and police things. My job in this class, as we saw earlier today, when you interfere with people who are trying to do things, that's what the line is. And yet, most of us will think we got away with something. I'm sorry to say, man, you're not getting away with anything. I don't mean in this class, I mean in life. Because we all pay for what we do and what we don't do. Because either everything that you do matters or nothing that you do matters. It all culminates at some point, and you're going to have to answer for it. That doesn't mean someone standing in front of you, asking you what you did. But many of you will have that in the forms of your children standing in front of you, asking you what you did, what you didn't do. And I imagine that most of you will throw away the evidence before you even get to that point. Throw that journal away. I didn't even write shit anyway. Still got my diploma. Yeah, but you know why you got your diploma, right? because they felt bad for you. No, really, you understand this. They pity you. They think that you are weak. And the irony there is that by treating you as though you're weak, well, they make you weak. I was thinking today, before second period, these two students came in, and they were standing here and they were commenting on this board. I didn't know who they were. Turns out they were former students of mine. They're here 2019 to 2020. I don't remember them. I don't recall them. I sat over here and talked to them for a good 15 minutes, 20 minutes, asking them questions. I kind of pieced together who they were. And then they mentioned another guy who told me, and then they mentioned they work at a local fast food place, I'll leave it at that. And I go, oh yeah, I know who you are. Not because I know who you are, but because this other student who I still talk to frequently, who comes in a lot, he knows them, and he's mentioned them. That's how I know who they are. Not because of who they are, but because who he's mentioned that they are. And they're working at this fast food place, and this girl has the gall to say to me, Scanlon, she should have said, you never told us what life was going to be like. You never told us life was going to be like this. What do you mean? And she says, well, we're having, both of them are working this job, minimum wage job. They're trying to make rent payments every month. They live together. They're making rent payments every month. They barely have any money. They're scraping by, and then they're finding that things keep getting tight, even though they just got a raise. Of course, in California, they just got a raise, and then they find that even though they got a raise, they seem to have less money. I was like, duh, because when you raise the minimum wage, then everybody else raises their prices also. Even people who aren't paying their people minimum wage raise their prices. So when you raise the minimum wage, of course people can afford less. Duh. You thought it was going to be, you thought that was for your benefit, not for the politician's benefit? You really believe that, and you really didn't pay attention then when you were in this class. And so she really sat there and said, you didn't really talk about about real life at all. Getting the same class many of you guys are getting. Are any of you guys tired of me talking about that same shit over and over and over again? No. Because in her mind, she never heard it. And then I asked her, what are you, fucking crazy? How could you possibly have missed this? And then it occurred to me that she told me which period she was in. I told you guys a story about hiding a student in the cabinet.
Yeah.
Yeah. She was in that period. She didn't remember that happening. And then she finally said, well, then again, I ditched a lot, though. Got it. So it was my fault for not teaching you about life when, we hit a student in a cabinet, and this classroom was crawling with 3 APs and a campus security person with a picture of this dude they're looking for, going person to person, looking around, walking right past the cabinet, and all of us are sitting there. Wondering, and in my head I'm practicing, welcome to Walmart, and and she has no recollection of that ever happening. And it makes you wonder what else she has missed in life. But to say, we didn't learn any of this stuff, it's like, that sucks, because then that means you didn't learn anything about who you are. And so I sat there and talked to her for a few minutes. At the end of it, she said, she kind of sits there and she looks at the desk, and the guy's sitting there, he just says, fuck. And then she says, I just learned more from you in 10 minutes than I learned that whole school year. Why? She wasn't ready. That's all. That's all. She wasn't ready. And that's another reason I encourage you guys to hold on to these things. Because right now, maybe you wrote 2 sentences. Maybe you wrote 2 pages. Maybe you just aren't ready yet. Maybe if you look at them in 10 years or 5 years or whatever, maybe you'll be ready. There's an old saying that when the student is ready, the master appears. In other words, you can come across all kinds of masters in your life. But if you're not ready to receive it, you're just not ready to receive it. And I think too often we treat that as though you're somehow a terrible, deficient, horrible person if you're not ready to receive this stuff yet. I don't think I've chastised anybody here, have I? For not getting this stuff, or not deeply engaging this stuff, or whatever. Some of you are ready, some of you are not. This class is very different from any other English class, I get that, and I'll have students who will be like, how come we don't just, read more short stories or something? How come we don't just do something different? I get it, because you would be doing better if we did something different, I understand. But, of course, we know that the truth is not really that. But instead, at some point in your life, someone may come along who's going to say the exact same things. It could even be word for word for what you heard in here. But at that point, you're ready. And that's great, because it can make, hopefully it primed the pump, hopefully it laid some seeds so that later on somebody else could come along and harvest that thing. It doesn't really matter who does that. What matters is that you get there some point, is that you get there someday. And the thing is that you could get there sooner. That's the tragedy of it. You could get there sooner. You could get there sooner. But there's so many things that we kind of place in our own ways. It's just like you're going to find in life is that so often the things in your life that really drag you down, unfortunately, are the things that we do to ourselves. It's not the obstacles that other people put in our ways. It's the obstacles that we put in our own ways. And there are obstacles that are put in your ways. Absolutely. There's obstacles that your families have put in your ways. There's obstacles that your friends have put in your ways. I mean, so many of us, we start off, and by there are obstacles that our families and friends put in our ways that wasn't even their fault. They didn't do anything wrong. It's just by virtue of the fact that we're connected with them, they had some bad luck or whatever, and now we find ourselves in a difficult position. I get that, and you can be angry. You can be resentful. You can be full of contempt. You can be nihilistic about it. Those are all choices. But so is the choice to sit there and say, I'm going to finish this game of chess. Remember this. Remember this story? About the professor playing chess? No? Oh, it's too bad. There's a philosopher named Jean-Paul Sartre. He's an existentialist. And he was asked, he was sitting around with his students one day, and they asked him, what would you do if the world was going to end tomorrow? And like, So he's there with his graduate students, they're playing chess. And the first one says, I guess I'd run down to the church and start praying. And the other one says, I'd go get a case of whiskey and go to a brothel, a whorehouse. And as they're going around the room, they're asked, everyone's giving the answers about what they would do. I'd go find my family and friends. I would go do this. I would go do that. And finally they get to Sartre, and they ask him, what about you, Professor? And he said, I'd finish this game. Why? Well, because everything else that they're talking about isn't real. I would do this, I would do that, I would. How many things in life do we know that people are going to do, or that they would do? You know, it's a fiction. It isn't real. It's an imaginary thing that we push into the future to give ourselves hope. Just like we say, man, if only I had access. Why not? I'll tell you this. I may come out. Understand where I'm coming from when I say this. It's just like I have students who will say, well, the reason I don't do better is because we don't have better teachers. They'll say, oh, like the rich schools, they have better teachers. You've got a guy in front of you who's got more degrees than most of you have letters in your name. I have 2 bachelors with honors and distinctions in both, 2 masters with honors and distinctions in both, and a PhD. So where are you going to go find a better teacher, someone who's better equipped to teach you? And yet, 80% of my 10th graders are failing, and about 40% of my seniors are failing. But if you have better teachers, maybe it's not the better teacher thing. Maybe it's the fact that you don't need the class to graduate, and maybe that tells you something about yourself. If I'm not forced to do something, if I don't have to do something, well, I mean, do you think anyone's going to make you and force you to do the things in your life that are going to help you excel and outperform everyone else? Of course not. People are only going to force you to do the things that are useful to them. Your employer is going to force you to be there on time because that's useful to them. They're not going to force you to go take extra training classes to become better so that you can advance in the company and maybe become their boss someday. They won't force you to do that. That's what has to come from inside. And this is why I don't force you to do these things, because I want you to know who you are at this point right now. It's like people say, oh, I'm a senior, I'm just over it. Whatever, man. Senioritis is such horseshit. What happens is that you have more teachers and administrators who are going like this at this point, and parents who are going like this at this point, saying, okay, whatever, you're almost there, just do what you do, and then when we're allowed to do what we do, we just sit down on the ground and go, then we eat fudgesicles or something, I don't know. In other words, we revert to the things that when we were in 6th grade, what we said, man, if I didn't have to do this, I wouldn't do this, I would do this, and so I'd ask you if all that teaching stuff is really effective. If all that forcing you to do stuff has been effective. I hope so. Because like I said, the things in your life that you're going to need in order to excel are not going to be, you're not going to be pushed into those things. You're going to have to freely choose those things. You're going to have to decide that things actually do matter. Showing up on time, that matters in lots of ways. I get it. People think that I show whatever I want. Okay, good luck. You think Elon Musk shows up whenever the fuck he wants? He's the boss. He owns the places, and he shows up 15 minutes early. Now, what do you think you tell Elon Musk if you show up 20 minutes early, and he's ready to go 15 minutes early? You know, let's go early. What message do you think you just sent that guy? What message do you think you sent that guy when you show up 2 minutes late? Like, oh, whatever. I got news for you. Elon Musk is gone. He's left. He doesn't have time to sit around and wait for you for 2 minutes. Whoever these people are. And that isn't me wagging my finger at you. This is me saying, dude, you're missing opportunities in life. You're missing things. You're also setting yourself behind. You walk into a situation late. Okay, what are we doing? What's going on? How are we even? You start off the whole time confused. And now you're dragging other people away from what they're doing, which means you're making the world a worse place. It becomes unimaginable how you could possibly become any better like this. And I know that saying this won't have an impact on most of you, but you can never say nobody warned you. Just don't be that person in 5, 10, 15 years who complains that, man, the system's against me. The world's against me. Everyone's racist. No one likes me. Oh shit, really? You really think it's that simple? If it's that simple to you, it's that simple to you in your mind. It's not that simple in the world. It's only simple to you in your mind because those are all self-serving things. Notice how you're not responsible for any of those things. And that's a comfortable place to be. But again, there's a price for everything. There's a price for that. Now you genuinely believe that you're not going to achieve, and you're not going to now, because you've built it into your head that you can't. And then that's going to make you full of resentment, because everybody who gets a promotion ahead of you, they're only getting it because the boss doesn't like you, because they're a bunch of kiss asses, because the boss is stupid. If you're so goddamn smart, how come you haven't started your own company? Why aren't you competing? If you come to a company and it's so badly run that the bosses are stupid, that's a golden opportunity for you to go, dude, this is done so badly, I can go start my own thing, and I could put them out of business in a year. But you know you couldn't, and so you'll make excuses. Well, I just don't have the money for it. Well, I just don't have the time for it. Well, I just don't. Whatever comes after the word just is usually bullshit. Just like whatever comes after all you have to do is usually bullshit. Look, all you have to do is bullshit. Whatever comes after. There is no all you have to do is. There's no just anything. Except unless we build that wall I was talking about earlier around our minds that stops us from stepping outside of that. So either nothing matters or everything matters. And you're going to go way further in life. The more things that you can take under your own responsibility and control, the further you can go in life because you're going to control more of it. That's all there is to it. And this isn't finger wagging at you. After 2 more weeks, I will probably never see most of you ever again. This isn't me finger wagging at you. This is me telling you something because I do care, because I do want you guys to do well. I think it'd be fucking fantastic if I turn on the news someday and I see how one of you guys put Elon Musk out of business. That'd be really cool. I just hope I hope you'll do good with it. Some of you, wherever it is that you end up, even if I run across you at Walmart at 2:30 in the morning and you're stocking shelves 10 years from now, I like to be able to look at you, if you go, Scanlon, I like to be able to ask you, like I always ask people, are you happy? And I like you to be able to go, yeah, that's cool. Stocking shelves at Walmart at 2:30 in the morning and you're happy, that's awesome. And I genuinely mean that. I genuinely mean that. You don't have to live the life I live. I don't have to live the life that you live. You have to live the life that you live. And I have to live the life that I live. Hopefully we can do it in such a way that we can kind of coalesce and be happy with where we all are. The problem is that I think that most of you are going to realize that you're capable of so much more. But again, it isn't to me that you have to give that accounting. Who do you have to give that accounting to? Yourselves. And a worse critic, a harsher critic, a less forgiving critic. Your families, someday. I mean the families you're going to create. Children and your spouses. You're going to have to give the accounting to them for the life that you're living right now. Because you're preparing that life right now. Whatever life you prepare right now is the life that these children of yours are going to be born into. And I just want to know if you want to give the best possible start to them. Or if you want to just wing it. And how many of our parents just winged it? You know, they did. They did. And by the way, that doesn't mean anything, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. And too often when I say something like that, people think, oh, Scanlon's talking shit. No, I'm just narrating the situation, man. You know, and many of our parents did the best they possibly could. They did the best they possibly could, and that's admirable. But we can do better. We can do better. Because if we're aware of it, if we know it, if we're singularly focused on these things. You know? But too many of us give up our true selves to play a role, to be less than what we could be. And that's because we've rejected ourselves. We've rejected your calling. We've rejected our archetype. We've rejected what we could be. We're caught in this vicious cycle that keeps closing in, diminishing our life. And don't miss this last part, being. And that word being right there, I'm not exaggerating when I tell you I could do a one-semester course on just that one word with you. Because it's such an incredibly important word, this idea of being. You know, when I ask you like who you are or what you are, these are the things that, what constitutes who you are? What you say, I guess first off what you think, and then what you say, and then of course what you do. And there's something that's so deep and powerful about that we completely miss it. The things that you think that come into your head, they're not original to you, of course. They're an amalgamation, a collection of the experiences that you've had in your life. Too often we get, we tell people, oh man, you just think what you're told to think. Don't we all just think what we're told to think? You know, it's just that some people are able to analyze it better and put it together differently. You know, and there's value in that. But it is that second one that's so incredibly powerful. Think about the things that you say. When you think something, where in the world is it? It's just in your head, physically, right? It's inside of your head. And if you never say it, it stays there, which means no one's ever going to hear it. But once you say something, it's hard to trust me on this. Or don't, look it up. Or just think about it. When you say something, you audibly, and when you speak, you create sound waves. That means the things that you say physically enter the world. This physical world around us. The things that you think, they stay inside your mental world, in the intellectual world if you're a Platonist. But in the physical world, when you speak, you literally bring something into the world. So I guess the question is, what do you want to bring into the world physically? Do you want to bring something good into the world by being kind and uplifting and motivating to people? By telling the truth, which sometimes won't feel kind, but it is kind. Or do you want to bring negativity into the world? Ugliness, deceit, lies, smears, slander. Are those the things you want to bring into the world? Because every time you speak, it matters. Because you're bringing something into the world, one of those two things. Literally, you're physically manifesting something, sound waves. And this is like a spiritual thing. This is just a straight materialist thing. You're introducing something into the world. There's no, isn't that the very lesson that we get from our religions? How does God create the universe? He speaks it into existence. He creates a physical reality from speech. There's something incredibly powerful about the ability to speak and speak well. There's nothing that's going to stop you in life if you're an articulate speaker, if you can get your points across, if you can speak in ways that people are willing to listen. And what is it that people will want to listen to? Well, people will listen to one of two things. Either when you tell them what they want to hear, of course, but there's something else if you can speak truth. People are afraid to hear. But truth, there's nothing more powerful than the truth. The truth is the very thing that sets you free. The truth is exactly the very fundamental foundation of the existence of the universe. There's an objective reality. Does the world exist or not? It's either true or it's not. Do you exist or not? It's either true or it's not. Truth is the very is the fundamental foundation of the universe. And so when you start to speak against the truth, you're challenging the universe. In a fight between you and the universe, I believe in you, the universe is going to kill you. That's what happens. You are not going to win out against the truth eventually. So you might as well get on board with the truth and speak the truth. The truth as best as you know it. Maybe you're wrong. Maybe you're mistaken. Not everything I tell you up here is 100% accurate. It's true in the sense that I will never lie to you. I'll tell you the truth. I might be wrong about some things. I've been wrong before. It's November of 2014, I think it was. I was wrong about something. It happens once in a while, every few decades. But you get in line with the truth about things, and you can't help but win. Even if it doesn't feel like you are. Of course you are. All that stops you from seeing that you're winning is a lack of vision. That's all it is. It isn't a lack of objective truth. And so, get on board with that. And the first step to all of that is to tell the truth about yourself. To yourself. Then when you can tell the truth about yourself, then you can speak truth. And your brain, and what you're speaking is in alignment with the universe. It's in harmony with the universe. And then after that, there's only one thing left to do, and that's to act in accordance with the truth, to do things that are true. Whichever of any of those things you're going to manifest in your life is a daily decision for you. And I wonder how many of us would want our children to manifest the truth this way. Would want the best for you. Because you're going to make those decisions someday. And I hope you all get there. Unfortunately, experience tells me that every couple of years I'll lose one of you. You guys, some of you will not make it to your 25th birthday. I can't even predict it. I wish I could choose it, but I can't. And so, live in such a way that you speak that truth. So if anything at all, at least that can be said about you, that you are working and living in harmony with the universe around you. Not trying to kick against it, not making it worse for you having been here, but having made the most and the best of every moment that you were here, for yourself, but even better for the people around you. Because remember, what you bring into the universe stays here forever. What do you want that to be? Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Happy Wednesday? Anybody got any good jokes?